So welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. My name is Evanique and I will be your moderator tonight. Tonight we have a special guest, Jamie Feinberg, one of my good friends and a person that I think exhibits um, the values that we try to put forth at 52 Living Ideas and in the Design Your Life Meetup. For those of you that are new, every third Friday of the month, we do a Design Your Life meetup where we find different speakers to talk about different ways that they design their life. And so that is what Jamie's going to be presenting about. Um, I met Jamie 6 years ago. Can you believe it, Jamie? 6 years ago, she was an RVer and, I always say living her best life. And then she did a wonderful thing. And after she did RVing for 5 years. She moved to um oh my gosh, Prince Edward Island. And so her husband Ross is going to school there and they wanted to live. I won't give the whole thing away, but um but she has been a huge example of how to design your life in a way that works. So, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jamie. Just before I do that, I just wanted to give you a quick flow. So, what we're doing is we are going to have Jamie present. Um, and then after Jamie presents, we will have a period of discussion with questions and comments. So, if you have any questions, please write them down and we will have questions and comments after she presents. So now I'm going to turn it over to you, Jamie.
Thank you so much, Evanique. And thank you all for having me here. I'm really happy to be a part of this. And yeah, as soon as I heard about what you're all doing with this program, it felt really aligned to me to come and speak and share my story and get to talk to all of you. So thanks for listening. So I am going to share my screen here, my presentation. All right. Evanique, can you let me know if you can see and hear everything that I'm doing right now?
Yes, I can see and I can hear everything.
All right. So yes, I am Jamie Feinberg. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today. So to get started, I've always been an adventurer, even before I had the words for it. And I wasn't afraid to be different, and I was always eager to try new things. So as an example, at age 2, my grandfather fed me horseradish, thinking that I'd hate it and I'd have a funny reaction, but I shocked him and everyone in my family by loving it. At age 6, I began refusing to eat off the children's menus at restaurants because I said they were for babies. I gravitated towards spicy and different, and unfortunately for my parents, seafood, which was usually pretty expensive. At age 8, I began writing fictional short stories starring versions of my classmates. And at age 9, I sold them to my classmates on the playground. At age 10, I created a neighborhood newspaper and I staged dance recitals and plays. I also started a jump rope club on the playground, and I was the only girl who felt comfortable playing with the boys at recess. At age 13, I started my own quartet with several talented musical friends. And at age 17, I produced an off-Broadway musical review at my school and raised about $900 for a cause that I cared about. So I was clearly predisposed on some level to embrace what made me unique and to assume that I had something of value to offer into the world. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that I grew up with a lot of privileges that gave me the runway and the space and the safety to explore my creativity. But even if we're creative as children, the world tries to teach us to conform and to behave predictably. Society, its systems want us to be dutiful workers, raise families, and score our success in life based on how much money is in our pockets or bank accounts or the title on our LinkedIn page. So what I've realized, especially in the past 10 or so years of my life, is that it isn't by mistake that I got here. It isn't by mistake that I pursued a creative career or have continued to reinvent myself time and time again when I felt the call. Each time I've stepped into a new stage in my life, I followed a 4-step process, and I like to think of it as my blueprint for crafting your life adventure. So today I'm going to share a little bit more about my story, specifically the ways that I've reinvented myself, clarified my values, and followed my own joy and creativity. And I'll share the 4 steps that I followed as an invitation for you to create a life that you love as well. So I was definitely a creative kid, but like so many of us, by the time I was in high school, I'd picked up a lot of messages that discouraged me from pursuing a creative career. Even though at age 5, I wanted to be a singing basketball player. And from age 8 through middle school, I wanted to be a writer. By my first year of high school, I had begun to assume I'd be a music teacher. Specifically, I began to assume that I would be working in a classroom, teaching kids music. It made sense, of course, because by 14, I had already taught my peers holiday songs for a play and taught some children in a camp setting. And I loved to sing, but something in my body, this is so clear in my memory, became truly uncomfortable just thinking about teaching in a classroom or saying out loud that I was going to do it. It was like I had to ignore the feeling in my gut at the same time that I would say, I'll be a teacher, or that I would think about being a teacher. But because I didn't have any role models who were successful in theater, which is where my heart really was at the time, or in any other kind of really creative performing arts life, I set my vision on what I knew, which was a classroom music teacher. It wasn't until a singer-songwriter named Judy Pancoast asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up that something shifted. I told her I thought I'd be a classroom music teacher, and she asked me again if that was what I wanted to do. And I said, no, not really. If I could be anything, I'd be in a Broadway show. But that wasn't realistic, so I should get a degree in teaching. I should get certified to teach music, even if it's my backup plan. And she said to me, no, if you want to be on Broadway, if that's truly what you want, you should not get certified to teach, because if you do, your backup plan will become your plan, and you won't give yourself the chance to go for your dream. Don't do what I did, she told me. I waited until I was in my 30s to pursue my songwriting career. Go for it now. So that's what I did. The decision was cemented when a friend of mine passed away at 17. And it would continue to be as other friends passed away in my early 20s, reminding me that nothing is guaranteed but this moment that I am in right now, and that you are in with me. I had a lot of privileges that helped to make it feasible for me to do this. Namely, I graduated from college in 3 years with my loans paid off. But when I graduated from school, I went all in on my passion for the performing arts. I had realized in my first semester in college that I would be just as happy as a musical director teaching the music for Broadway musicals as performing. So that's what I threw myself into. And over the years, I gained more experience and remained open to the possibilities. And I kept checking in with myself. Is this making me happy? Is this the best use of my time? Is this keeping me moving toward and in a life that I love? I performed and directed across the United States. When my parents announced that they were divorcing after 25 years of marriage, I felt called to be at home again to support my twin brothers who were about to start high school. And I moved back to New Hampshire where I'd grown up, making time to take each of them out for ice cream or go for a walk or whatever they wanted to do each month with me, lending them an ear if they wanted it. I then remade myself in New Hampshire. I picked up part-time work as a preschool music teacher, worked with local theater companies, ran camps, taught music lessons, and soon I realized that as much as I had enjoyed professional theater, I loved working in educational and amateur theater even more. And when I started to feel that something was missing in the balance of my life, then I would keep revising that equation. For instance, I staged a fundraiser as a way to make friends as a young adult because I didn't know anyone in New Hampshire anymore, and it worked. I got a master's degree in community economic development when I began to feel that being self-employed as an artist in New Hampshire might not be sustainable for the long term. I created my own theater company when I wanted an outlet for my own passion projects, the shows that I loved most, but that were never performed in New Hampshire. And I took a dream job, my first full-time arts position, as the program manager of the Arts Alliance of Northern New Hampshire, moving to a beautiful mountainous region where I'd previously loved to visit. Along the way, as I learned more and more about myself, I became a better partner, eventually dating and marrying my husband, Ross. And after our wedding, and about 6 months after a fantastic honeymoon on Prince Edward Island and in Nova Scotia, Canada, my husband admitted something to me that changed everything. When he was in high school, and since, he had a dream of being a touring musician. He then qualified it, of course, dismissing it as a possibility, but my brain heard dream and vision unfulfilled, and immediately I went into problem-solving mode. How can I help my husband to become a touring musician? So with that question on my mind, I got to work using the 4 steps that I've since realized have actually guided all of my major decisions as an adult. No slide. There we go. Step 1, create your vision. Step 2, do your research. Step 3, articulate your strategy. Step 4, take daily deliberate steps. I began by creating a vision of what our future might look like. My brainstorming was all over the place. I started by getting clear on what our values and priorities were. I handled our finances, so I knew enough about our current situation to see that even though I was the main breadwinner, I would not be able to afford for Ross to just take off and travel for months at a time so that he could realize this touring musician dream. Then I started looking into vans and RVs. Could we maybe afford to buy one? Could we give up our apartment and live in one? As dreamy as it sounded, some of them were as expensive as a house. And I knew that it wouldn't be realistic for us to do that either, at least not for a long time. And at the same time that Ross was dreaming of being a touring musician, I was feeling more and more burnt out from my dream job, which was turning out to be very different from what I had hoped for. So with clarity about what mattered most to us, being together, opportunities for Ross to make money, traveling and touring, and getting the opportunity to see more of the United States to inform an eventual move and settling down somewhere outside of New Hampshire, the universe returned my questions with a gift, a dream. I had a literal dream. In this dream, I had the idea for us to buy a used RV, which hadn't occurred to me yet. When I woke up, I nudged Ross and I asked if he wanted to do it, and he said yes. I was off to the races with step 2. I began researching how in the world 2 artists would be able to travel the US in a used RV. Was anyone doing this? How? What would the cost be? What kind of gear would we want for traveling? How would we get insurance? Where would our residence be? So RVing back in 2014, when I began my research, was nowhere near as popular as it is now. There were several prominent bloggers who were documenting their own full-time travels. So I found that out as soon as I did my first Google search. I researched how to live and also where we might be able to book work, planning our travel route for the first several months on the road, and finding venues that we might be able to visit. As I did my research, I was also able to refine my vision. As I learned more about what others had done before us, I got a clearer picture of where we'd stay and how we could earn money along the way as work campers, as they call it, at a campground or in other short-term positions when we didn't have enough music gigs lined up. So armed with a vision of what we wanted life to look like, less stress, sharing Ross's music around the United States, time to explore and enjoy our surroundings, and having devoured the blogs of several prominent full-time RVers, it was time to articulate our strategy. I created spreadsheets. I got super clear on our budget, and I was shocked to realize that we were slowly losing money, even with our 2 incomes. Yikes. So with this new knowledge, I created a very tight budget for us that would allow us to stop draining our savings and reverse the trend so we'd be able to purchase an RV and get an ample savings account for when we hit the road. I also resolved to pick up more part-time work where I could, focusing my efforts on teaching lessons, preparing people for auditions, playing at churches, things that I'd done successfully in the past. And with that clarity, I found a church to play at a couple of times a month. And then within a couple of months, I actually found a permanent church position that would fit my schedule and pay me very well. So all of that money would then go straight into our savings account. Knowing that we would be moving into a small space, we also made a big announcement to our families. We officially announced that we would no longer be accepting physical gifts. So basically we said we're welcoming experiences, but we are decluttering our home, we're downsizing. At that point, we had an apartment, a small teaching studio for my husband, and some belongings in storage at my dad's office. So we had a lot of stuff. Though our RV dream was still a secret, we were open about the fact that we've been thinking about tiny home living for years, which was true. And so we encouraged that instead of physical gifts, people might give us food, which is, of course, a consumable gift, or, a gift certificate, a gallery membership, that kind of thing. We made plans to visit an RV show, and we started watching listings to see what our options would be to purchase in the coming months or coming years when we were ready. And we began subtly adjusting our mindset in another way. We would ban ourselves from spending time in the living room and the spare bedroom completely to try to simulate the space that we would have inside an RV. We stopped ourselves from making impulse purchases. And when one of our cars was in an accident, we stopped ourselves from replacing it, as challenging as that was to live with in rural New Hampshire. I began keeping a blog. I called it Ross and Jamie Adventure casually, but the full original name was Crafting the Lives We Want, a Practice in Living. And years down the road, when I became a coach, that would shift to Crafting the Life You Want, a Practice in Living. In it, I documented the steps from the large to the mundane that we were taking to get ready. I kept the blog completely private, knowing that it would be months or even years before we were ready to announce our plans to the world. Ultimately, I shared it with a few friends as we got braver and told them about it. Our families would come much later, but each day and each week, we were taking deliberate steps to realize our vision. And those steps really paid off, and quickly, especially for two people like us who didn't have benefits with our jobs or even, frankly, like comfortable incomes. In less than a year and a half after I had that dream with the idea of purchasing a used RV, we purchased one. Actually, we purchased two. The first one, purchased way under our budget, ended up being a dud, and we had to resell it at a bit of a loss. But the second one, purchased with financing from an RV dealership, was a winner. It was comfortable, roadworthy. Our 25-foot 2005 Winnebago Mini was ready soon for our cross-country adventure. So it's time for us to hit the road. In my research, people always suggested that you wait to go until you have a ton of savings, or at least until you've been able to reduce your monthly expenses as much as possible. And I agree that that is all great advice. We did not do a very good job following that advice. We saved as much as we could before we left because we did know that the RV could break down at any time. So we wanted to be prepared for that. And we made sure to purchase the RV before I had left my full-time position, because without it, no one would have been willing to loan me the money that we needed to finance the RV that we chose. But we did some things that were definitely unconventional. When we started our travels, we had very little income lined up. We'd booked several gigs, but only a couple of them were actually paid. Most of the places we had been reaching out to had completely ignored us. We had no booking experience at all before we started this. So we had to trust that we were going to get better at booking, or if it really wasn't going to work out for Ross and the music thing, that we would figure something else out on the road. And while some of Ross's music students were excited to continue lessons with him over Skype at the time, I didn't have any work lined up. I had a few ideas of people who might give me some work to do online potentially. And I had a few blogs that I was writing that were currently earning $0. We also had really high expenses compared to other full-time RVers who I was reading about. Both Ross and I still had significant student loans, including private ones for Ross. I still had some medical debt that I was paying off. And of course, we had financed the RV, so we had a monthly payment we were putting towards the RV in addition to, RV insurance and all of that. But because we had our priorities in order, we knew what mattered to us. And we were realistic, continuing to check in on our budget and reassess as we went. And we continue to do that. And I think that was really key in our success long term. The regular check-ins and time reevaluating, keeping sight of the big picture and our priorities was really essential. I will not tell you that traveling across the country in a tiny space with your new husband is a breeze. I always said that traveling in an RV like we did would either bring us closer together as partners or end in divorce. We had rough days, and honestly, we had some really rough months as well. For instance, just in year one, we did have all of these negatives. So I accidentally threw my husband's wedding ring away. Believe it or not, that was before the RV left New Hampshire. A deer ran into our car and totaled it while we were in rural Iowa. My car insurance company then gave me a really hard time, and they only agreed to help us out with the car when I started making noise on Twitter about their lack of attention to it. We also had to cancel a planned trip to San Diego to see my sister because we realized we were running out of money and we weren't going to be able to make it to our final destination if we went to San Diego. And then we had to pick up food service jobs in Florida to make ends meet, which, you know, it's not the end of the world in itself, but we spent several months where Ross was bussing tables and I was making smoothies. And Ross was so physically exhausted by the work and humbled, I think, by it, that he was really struggling to do anything creative, even on his days off, which was kind of counterproductive for a season, as you can imagine, given that we were partly on the road because he's a musician. But some of the positives in year one, on the other hand, were super, super good. We saw a ton of states that we had never seen before. We got to visit places like Seneca Falls, which is the site of the first women's rights convention that I had always wanted to see, or the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum that I had been reading and seeing people's posts about for a long time. We got to visit art museums, botanical gardens, all the ice cream places, very important to me. And because we became Florida residents, we were able to get cheap weekday passes to go to Disney World, which was very fun. I was hired to write for 2 RV companies part-time, so I got to fulfill my dream from age 8 of being a professional writer. We spent a summer living on the Outer Banks in North Carolina as activities directors, where we got to use all of our creative and leadership talents while enjoying life lived on the ocean with daily walks to the water. And perhaps the best was that Ross got to share his music across the country with performances at many venues in Arizona, Texas, and Florida. So at the end of year one, we were definitely in agreement that we wanted to continue this lifestyle. Though we'd originally planned to find a place to settle down and to get real jobs after our time adventuring, during our travels, we fell in love with the flexibility of creating a life that we loved on our terms. In years 2 and 3 and 4, we got better and better at being self-employed. Ross, with administrative support from me, built a thriving part-time podcast and video editing business to supplement his work as a performer and composer and music educator. And at the same time, I was building a thriving virtual assistant business to supplement my own work as a writer, performer, educator. As we got more clarity and business experience, we were able to focus our energy exclusively on either our remote work or the music and arts gigs that really lit us up. And that remote success also meant that we didn't have to trade work for a campsite as we'd often done early on. We could just pay for places to stay. We kept tweaking our lives, adjusting and improving our businesses and processes. We kept sight of our budget, adjusted the distribution of chores and responsibilities when one of us was feeling overwhelmed, and we helped each other to be as successful as possible with as little stress as possible. We made sure also to have several income streams at all times because we knew nothing was guaranteed, especially for artists. We loved the lives that we created so much that I wanted everyone to have the same opportunities that we had had. I wanted people to create a life that they loved too. So after several less formal coaching and consulting sessions that I worked on in 2019 and 2020, I completed a coaching mentorship and leaned into life and career coaching fully. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a bit here as I continue. So the timing ended up being fortuitous for that transition into coaching because I lost most of my virtual assistant clients due to the pandemic in 2020. And at the same time, as musicians and music educators, we also lost all of our in-person work. Susan David refers to emotional agility as holding difficult emotions and thoughts loosely, facing them courageously and compassionately, and then moving past them to ignite change in your life. I think it was that ability to do that was key to us during that time period. I'm not going to lie, 2020 was still a really rough year for us, but by then I'd gotten better at boundaries and navigating my own feelings and thoughts, and my husband had been too. I dedicated a lot of energy to my own personal development, and while much of the world was shocked to be unable to travel anywhere and be boxed in, we were used to living in a tiny space. And we even seized opportunities to be a part of courses and summits where we ended up teaching people how to negotiate working from home with their spouse, or how to travel in an RV full time once the pandemic allowed, all of that stuff. With the US 2020 election looming, we began reevaluating our next steps. We knew that we loved the lifestyle and the freedom and flexibility that it provided us with. And honestly, we were afraid to stay in the United States. We were concerned that our ability to maintain this lifestyle or to have this flexibility would be taken away, either because we'd lose access to affordable health insurance, or we'd lose birth control, or we'd lose other rights that we hold dear. So we decided to be proactive about it because we were privileged to be able to, and we were able to think about what we wanted in the future and plan our lives accordingly. We'd been discussing since our honeymoon going back to Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, if we could ever figure out how, in Canada. We had just fallen completely in love with the city. And it had really been a conversation. I remember we talked about it in 2016, probably around the time of the election. And by October of 2020, we decided it was time to make it happen. So once again, I returned to those 4 steps. And quite honestly, that's also what I had done with my coaching business and my virtual assistant business. So we created a vision of our future in Canada. We researched the different ways that we could live there long term. And we interviewed potential schools before we settled on the ones that Ross applied to, and ultimately the one that he decided to go to. We articulated a strategy to get ourselves back from our current campground in New Mexico to our storage unit in New Hampshire, and then moving to Canada. And we began to take those daily deliberate steps. So today, I live a life that I love. I've found balance and community here. I help people, especially child-free women, to figure out what they really want, whether that's time to pursue an old dream, a new career, a hobby, or travel, and then make it a reality. And when I'm not coaching, training people in mental fitness, or facilitating Enneagram study groups, I am writing, performing in Luminos Ensemble, or I perform with my husband and I direct Island Acapella, which is a women's barbershop acapella music group here on Prince Edward Island. And I'm eating a lot of ice cream. I have designed a life that I love, and I've cultivated the tools that help me to truly enjoy it. I've tackled my own mental health struggles, and I continue to use the tools that I've learned to be happier, to be more efficient and effective, and to lead with empathy while maintaining my own boundaries. I'm writing a book about my journey. I'm speaking about my story and coaching others who would like support and encouragement in creating a life that they love too. So now I'm offering, a chance for you, if you'll indulge me and take a couple minutes to do a quick exercise with me, I would love that. For the next couple of minutes, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, and if you'll feel more comfortable turning your video off, if it's on right now, feel free to do that, or you're welcome to leave it on as you like. So if you can close your eyes, we'll begin. The question that I'd like you to ponder lightly as you listen to and join me in this is, if this was your last year on Earth, what would be the one thing that you would most want to accomplish? So if you haven't yet closed your eyes, please do. Let's start by tuning into our breath. You don't need to slow it down. I just would like to encourage you to observe the inhale and the exhale. See if you can hear the sound of your breath. Maybe you can notice the temperature of your breath. Perhaps the inhale is a different temperature or the same as the exhale. See if you can notice. Keep coming back to your breath. If you can feel the muscles of your body that get involved when you take a breath in and when you exhale it out. Next, let's feel ourselves connected to the earth. Maybe you can feel your feet on the floor. If they're on the floor, maybe you can find your toes and wiggle them if you want to help you to find them. Or maybe you're feeling yourself on your seat. Feel that connection. Just observe what you notice. And you can keep noticing your breath whenever you like. It's a beautiful place that you can return to feel grounded and connected. Even when the world feels anxiety-provoking or uncertain, if it feels frightening or frustrating. As you keep part of your attention noticing your breath, gently invite your wise mind to reflect on this question. If this were your last year on Earth, what is the one thing you would most want to accomplish? As you notice what's coming up for you, notice your breath as it rises and falls. Notice how your body felt when I asked you that question. And did it feel different before than it feels now? What's that one thing you would most want to accomplish? And if negative thoughts or tension are coming up for you, I invite you to tune back into your breath and let those thoughts go. And please try not to judge what came up for you or rationalize it away. Just observe it. Don't let the sabotaging voices in your head, which we all have, take over this conversation. Keep returning to your breath. Now I invite you to focus on a sound you're hearing. So you can focus on the sound of my voice, or if there's a sound in your room, or if you want to focus on the sound of your own breath. Observe the qualities of that sound. Keep staying present with the sounds around us. And now hopefully we're feeling a little bit calmer, and I ask while you're in this calm space, hopefully the negative voices have quieted a little bit. I ask you to, and invite you to make a commitment. What's that one small thing that you will commit to doing this next week to help you move toward that goal? It can be so small, but what is that one thing? I'll give you a second to think about that. And keep returning to your breath. Feel the ground beneath you. And you can keep pondering. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes as I finish this out. So I'll say that accountability is an essential piece in our success. So I'd encourage you that if you're comfortable to do so, it would be great for you to share the small steps that you're going to take. You can share it in the comments if you feel comfortable sharing it with the group. If you'd rather keep it private for now and maybe share it with a trusted friend or person, that would be beautiful. And if you don't yet have that person that you feel is not going to judge, that would keep this safe, this part of your dream, because it does take time to find those people, then I would love to either help you find that person or be that person for you. So feel free to connect with me about that. But in any case, I encourage you to find a person to help you to stay accountable to this commitment that you're making to yourself. And I also want to acknowledge that just by being here today, you are already taking a step, right, towards designing your life. So that's already a small step that you're making. And I want to acknowledge that and thank you for that. And I hope that you continue on the path. So I'm going to resume sharing just for a second. So I did want to thank you for inviting me to be with you today. I'm just throwing up there my contact info, though of course you've got it for the original meetup link all that stuff was in there too. If you'd like free tools or further support, or you want to read my book when it's ready, that would be a wonderful thing to connect with you about online. So I've got ways to do all of that. And I would love to hear about the life that you are designing as well.
Thank you, Jamie. That was a beautiful presentation. If anybody has any questions or comments for Jamie, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. While people are lining up, I just wanted to say I love that 4-step process of creating a vision, doing your research. And I didn't get the other two, but I kind of started writing down what you said. Um, I think the thing that I just wanted to point out is that, like, that question of what do you want your life to look like? And, like when you had that vision, I was like, wow. And I know your story. And I was like, I was still wild about it, right? So, like how were you sure, I guess, or, my first question is like, how would you have people knowing that they're sure about that vision, or, what advice would you give to people that have that vision but need to act on it in alignment with those 4 steps? Um, like, could you just go a little more into that, if that made sense?
Yeah, I think so. So the first part of what I heard you say was, what if you don't like have the clarity of that vision, or you're not sure? And if you know you want some sort of change, but you're not sure exactly how to go about it, or you don't have the clarity yet, or you're looking for something, or maybe you kind of think the goal, but how to get there feels really murky and you're not sure how to begin. One thing I would encourage is, the more time you can spend doing things that tap into the wiser part of your brain, the better. So for me, the types of activities that do that for me are things like taking walks in nature, dancing, being with people and having deep conversations, listening to inspiring podcasts, reading books, right? Like maybe it's attending events like this. And it's creating space in your life for space too. Like sometimes it's in the shower that you get these kinds of ideas, but creating opportunities where you kind of get aligned with your best self. Some people talk about it being the flow, right? When you talk about being in a flow state. And mindfulness practices are a beautiful way to get into that flow more quickly. And I do a lot of training on that. But the more you do that, the more likely it is that wiser part of you will start to put those pieces together and be like, oh, hey, this is it. And if something keeps coming up again and keeps coming up again, that's a good sign that this might be the way. If you're having trouble getting started, first of all, I'll just reiterate the 4 steps one more time. So yeah, the first one was create your vision. The second one was do your research. The third step is articulate your strategy. So when you create your vision, it's not necessarily like your vision might just be like, I'm going to be, I don't know, I'm going to be on television promoting the solution to life, whatever it is, right? You've got your vision. And then you do your research, because until you do your research, you're not going to have a lot of clarity on the strategy. It's going to feel like, I see this image of myself doing this thing, or, living this kind of way, but how the heck do I get there? So the do your research step is how you start to fill in the blanks to know what is the first step I should take, and what are the pitfalls I need to know about, and, is this the right strategy, or should it be this or this? So the research is how you start to get yourself there. And then the fourth step is to take daily deliberate steps. And what I don't articulate in the 4 steps, but what is true, I talked about this in the presentation, is that you'll keep refining it. So I think it was really helpful for me, and it continues to be helpful for me, to try to hold my strategy loosely, like have a clear vision that I'm working toward, but be open to the possibilities of what pops up in life. I've had a lot of amazing things that have happened that if I had stuck too closely to exactly the plan that I thought I had and the way that I thought my life was going to unfold, I would have missed out on all sorts of stuff, which would have frankly taken me down a completely different path. So, so that's it. Create your vision, do your research, articulate your strategy, and take daily deliberate steps. I would say having some source of accountability is a great idea, like I mentioned. And if you're having trouble getting started, making that small commitment to just telling a person that is close to you who, you know, maybe you go through your Rolodex of who you know, maybe there's a particular person who is gonna like hold your feet to the fire, who's not gonna just let you be like, oh, that's nice, and then just let you off the hook. Maybe they will check in periodically, and maybe that's what you need, right? So you be strategic about what it is. And if you personally need a nudge to get going, you know, find an accountability partner. And there are so many great groups like this that you can connect with people online too, if you don't have a person in your day-to-day life, like physically, who is that person for you. So there are a lot of ways to do that. So, you know, find an accountability buddy, find somebody else who's going after something. And then you can hold each other, you know, just to daily check-ins, right? The same way that people talk about like having a weight loss partner, right? Or exercise buddy. The same thing, it can absolutely be true for this.
Thank you, Jamie. I have so much more to ask, but there's a question in the comments, so I'm going to let Eleanor go first. And if anyone else has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say that I enjoyed this presentation, Jimmy, and I loved your questions, Evangelique. So I actually experienced it on my own in my personal life to follow my own, how do you say, ideas, and it's not easy. It takes years. Sometimes it can take up to 20 years to get there. I'm right now at the moment in my 21st year actually to follow up my idea of life, and sometimes I even double question my idea if it's the right one, because my lifestyle changes and my inspiration changes too. So I'm kind of like trying to modify it even and adjust it to on a run. But it's definitely, there are many setbacks, and sometimes in between I wish I would not have started it, because now I cannot jump off. I just have to keep going. And then I'm all of a sudden also getting new ideas and starting new games with my personal life. So it's kind of interesting. I love that. But it's definitely, I admire you and your partner for doing this all, because I know what it all means and how many setbacks you probably had, and probably how many tears you also left behind you. So yeah, and such movements are never easy, and especially because they're all depending on money, and everything is nowadays money. But I do also think that it's not wrong when people don't have necessarily ideas, then they're happy. For me, I met those people too, and they seem to be complete and happy. They're just coming from a different place. So I don't judge. Not everyone needs ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you've already got a life that you're loving as it is, then I would never object, you know. I would say enjoy. be present to what to this life that you love. But for those of us who realize there's something missing, or there's something better, there's something that's just itching, and we have to find a way to bring it to fruition, then it's worth it to do it. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Eleanor. Up next, I have Judy.
Hi, Jamie. I have a comment more than anything. At a later age, I'm trying to start something new. And I'm having a little bit of problems in the research part and the research step. Because the vision is there, I've gone through 50 years of career changes and all kinds of activities and no regrets, travel, everything. So I'm pretty accomplished in what I have done. But now at 77, I want to do something like end with a bang or something. But I'm seeing that it's so hard to go out there and do research. There's so much, so everybody's doing such wonderful things. It's kind of disheartening. Say, oh my God, I have so much to learn. I still, don't have that much time and all these other things. So any comments that you can help me to learn how to fast forward my learning and my synthesizing and my researching that I have to do, because I know what I want to do. I know, but I don't know how I want to do it. And that's the research part. So any comments that you can advise me on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think faced with that, I would bring up that I've had different times when I wasn't sure exactly what the right approach would be. And I'm thinking, in particular, about like when I started my virtual assistant business, like the process that I went through is like, at the time I honestly was starting, I had like 5 or 6 different projects going. Like I also had started a podcast, and yeah, I was trying to grow this writing business. I was, in my music teaching, and it was just like doing all these different things. But the research element of it, something that's really helpful is to figure out who is it that I'm serving, right? Like people talk about like, who's your ideal client? Who is this for? And basically, people also talk about the minimum viable product. So can you come up with, like, at its simplest form, what's the like kind of bare minimum version? And then can you go to the people who would be taking advantage of this thing? And can you interview a few of them, right? Can you have a phone call with them and talk through, hey, this is what I'm thinking. So you can get some clear feedback from the people you're directing it toward. And then as soon as possible, you want to launch the bare minimum viable product version. I've done pilots, right? Like my husband created an online ukulele course, and it was nowhere near ready. But I knew it would, again, like put a fire under our butt if we just announced we were doing it and we had people sign up. So people paid to be a part of the pilot program, and we gave them an amazing discount in exchange for the fact that, well, you get two chapters, and then whenever the other ones are ready, we're going to release those and you'll get to do those. So they got a really good deal on a course, and we had some motivation to keep showing up and releasing, recording and then releasing these courses. So something like that is like, it's like those two pieces, like make sure you're talking to people, and then the sooner you can do something, even if it's, hey, this is my dirty version, rough version, whatever it is, to get you started. And then you end up getting a lot more clarity once you're actually doing it. I like the phrase clarity follows action.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Judy. Up next, I have Joe, followed by Eleanor.
Thank you, Jamie, for joining us. I apologize for being late, but it's a great topic and something that I thought a lot about. I've actually was just wondering, one of the things that find it really interesting is there's a lot of times people will set goals, and they have goals, and you know, some, whether it be start your own business, whether it to be work for a particular employer, whether it to be, you know, pursue a particular hobby, whatever it may be. But how do you advise people on basically getting to the point where they're asking why they're doing it in the first place, like in that identification exercise? Because I think that that's a really important part. Sometimes we set these goals and we maybe don't stop and ask why we're doing it in the first place. So maybe if you have some comments on that.
Absolutely. So in my coaching work one-on-one with clients, I always start at the very beginning creating a vision statement. So we look at all the different areas of your life to get clear on your priorities in each area because of exactly what you're saying. Like sometimes we kind of arbitrarily have set goals, but I think sometimes those goals, they're coming from other people. They're, you know, whether it's society says I'm supposed to own a house, or, you know, my parents encouraged me all the time to do this thing growing up, but maybe I didn't stop to think if that's actually, you know, the career that I want or something like that. So I really find it helpful to create a vision statement or some version of that. Some people create like a mission, but something like that, looking at each area of your life. So, you know, with my client, it might be things like, you know, like a sentence about my philosophy when it comes to my family, about my friends, about like where does my spirituality play into this? Like what does career mean to me if career is a thing, or how does work play into it, right? So all the different components of your life, looking at each of them and saying what matters to me. Because when you're thinking about designing your life, it doesn't do you any good if you design a brilliant career that like you absolutely love, but it takes you away from the family or the friends or the, you know, the hobbies or whatever, the other things in your life that actually for you personally are more important. You know, some people don't need a career that I guess will set any records or like be particularly memorable, right? Like some people are content to go to do a job and then come home and spend time with the people they care about. And other people are like, I need that job to be a very specific thing that, or make me feel a very specific way. And you have to get clear on your priorities. So yeah, like a vision statement, mission statement, something like that, some sort of process to articulate that for yourself, I think is really key. And if you've never done it before, it's never too late, but be prepared that it might have you reevaluating things a little bit.
Joe, you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, if I just ask a brief follow-up to that, is that, so once you've identified it, and I really appreciated the answer, is that, you know, you question the influences in your life and see if that's really what's directing you, or if you're directing yourself. But, you know, building off of that, then how would you say that, how would you approach coming up with a set of principles then maybe govern the why? So, you know, I think of, and we've talked about principles here on a number of different occasions, whether it be when, you know, an author named Ray Dalio, who you may have heard of, and other individuals. But I think that that's a critical part, is that identifying the principles and then the processes that, and the goals that we've already talked about with Judy a little bit earlier. But if you could comment on that briefly.
I think there are a lot of great resources out there to help with the principles. Like with my clients, we start with a template just because having something in front of you to say, okay, well, how do I want to word this, or things like that. But ultimately, I think there are a bunch of different ways that you can go about it and different resources. So it's really like, I wouldn't say I have a particular method for identifying your principles. I really think there are a bunch of ways to go about it. I think for some people, they already have like some people have a spiritual component that's already active in their life, and that might already give them some sense of those. So there are lots of different ways that you can come about it. But I think however you do it, you need to have that articulated. And then I guess the other piece I didn't say is when I'm working with a client, we also will go through and like rate, basically rate how happy you are in each area, because that's also going to help. It doesn't shape the principles, but it's going to help tell you what are my priorities, like what's my next step, right? If there's a particular area of your life that you're really unhappy in, and that's an area that, especially if that's an area that's really important to you, then you would obviously want to move more quickly in that area. That might shape your next step.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Joe. Up next, I have Eleanor.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Judy, and I think it's very difficult to develop a workflow, especially from scratch. How I do it, I connect to people, and sometimes I find it very difficult to work with same like myself, because there's competition and pressure, and a lot of want to make more money as you or want to be on top of everyone. So competition is high. But sometimes I find it even much more easier to work with people who are not from my field personally. So in terms of research, maybe I would connect just with curious people. And so curiosity and want to learn something is very important. Never stop learning. This is how I do personally. And then I had to learn to make my own mistakes, because I was very scared to make mistakes. And then I punished myself. But then I had to learn not to get, every time I make a mistake, PTSD afterwards. So I had to develop some sort of, oh, I can progress on this mistake, I can learn, and it's not bad. And this took me actually quite a while, and in what I do. And then I have to realize that basically when I got this shock as I made a mistake, I had to gain a realization how can I change it and move forward and adjust. And this was kind of like an ego play. So it's kind of like riding my own wild horse. So it's very difficult, yeah. That's it.
And thank you,
The
Eleanor.
willingness to make mistakes is great. It's so helpful.
I'm sorry, Jamie. Can you repeat that? I interrupted
Sorry.
you.
I said, yeah, I'm sorry. I said the willingness to make mistakes is really key. I think it's such an important thing to learn, that you will make mistakes, and then how are you going to keep going? You know, so many super successful people got really successful after they'd already failed at a whole bunch of other things. It's super normal, but we don't normalize talking about that.
And thank you, Jamie. Up next, I have Joe.
So yeah, just building off that, maybe if I could ask you, had so many varied experiences that, you know, in the write-up that I noticed, you know, that it seemed like you were fearless to a certain degree. So I mean, how do you necessarily overcome that, and, you know, your fears, you know, when trying so many different things, you know, whether it's driving across the country or trying something in music or whatever it may be. How do you, you know, when you're first looking at something and deciding you want to do it, you know, there has to be some apprehension. So I was just wondering maybe if you had any, you know, insights as to how to, you know, conquer your own fears.
That's a great question. Yes, I definitely have fears, have had fears, and it's how do I conquer them? I think the process that I laid out, like, I think research is a part of it, and a part of the research in terms of what I then do with it. Like, when I articulate my strategy, I'm one of those people who I feel better knowing what the worst case scenario might be. So I will do that. Like, in all of my cross country stuff, like, I said that early in the presentation, I said, you know, we hit the road with a less ideal setup than most people would recommend. We did not have clear income sources lined up, frankly, at all. Most people would not do that. But we did have enough money in our bank account that I felt pretty darn certain that we would be able to handle if we got stuck somewhere, if we had to, you know, deal with a bunch of repairs. And we kept checking in to make, so basically, like, we were taking risks, but not the riskiest risks at any given time. So there was always like a level of security. If we were in travel mode, one of the things that we would often do would be to stop somewhere for the night. And we had all these different apps that help guide you to know where can you stop and not pay for a campsite. And I would always have 2 or 3 of them lined up, because if you show up at this Walmart and it turns out that recently that Walmart or that city decided you're not allowed to camp here anymore, what's your backup plan? So I try to always have, you know, an option B or an option C, and that's part of how I conquered my fear. And I think the other part of it that comes to mind is a lot of recognizing myself for the wins I have had and the ways I have succeeded in the past, and not losing sight of that, and learning to trust myself, which I think I've, you know, over time you get better and better at it. So as you take more and more risks and have more and more successes, you start to recognize, I've had a lot of surprises in the past. I've had to deal with things I wasn't expecting, and I've been able to handle it. So I'm going to trust that I can handle it this time. And then, of course, the other thing is, when the reward is so great, it's worth it to, like, face your fear, because yes, there's a chance your worst fears might come true, but there's, I think, an even better chance that some great stuff is going to come from it, including things that are even better than you would imagine.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Jamie. If anyone else has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. Actually, Jeff now has typed exclamation point, so I'm going to let him go, and then I'm going to let Joe go. And I'm letting people go ahead of me because Jamie, and like I said, Jamie and I've been friends for 6 years, so I know this story, and you know, I think one of the things that knowing you has made me a better person, because I know how resilient you are, and I know, like, how much you plan. And when we talk, it's like, okay, like, what is your goal? And, like, you know, you're not afraid to fail. I think that's the thing. And I wouldn't even call it failing. Um, I think I would call it more, um, I think, like you said, unexpected things happen. So, yeah, definitely. But I'm going to let other people go first. So, Jeff, followed by Joe. Jeff, if you're talking, you're on mute. Jeff, just gonna give him a few more seconds. Jeff, if you're talking, you're on mute. Otherwise, I can go to Joe and then come back to you. Joe, do you want to go first?
Sure. You know, one of the things Jamie actually talked about is, and forgive me if this has been covered already, is measuring your client's happiness, and on a scale. So I was wondering if you could actually go into some detail about that. How do you inquire about that and actually determine that? Because sometimes, you know, I've struggled figuring out, how happy am I? Like, you know, it's in, you know, my own self. So I'd be interested in hearing any kind of questions that you have in order to dive deeper into what somebody may be feeling.
Sure. I have a fairly straightforward intake form that I use with my clients. So at the first session, typically, I'll go point by point with all these different areas of their life and ask them to score themselves. Off the top of my head, I can't remember if it's a 5-point scale or exactly what it is, but it's something like that. So they're just giving me a number. And basically, I will then follow up a little bit. So they'll say the number off the top of their head, like, you know, how happy are you in the area of, you know, of your career, you know, 1 to 5, and, you know, 5 being the happiest or whatever. And then they'll tell me. And then if I have follow-up questions, which I often do, I'll get a little bit more information from them. So it's just working through the different areas, you know, and you let people talk, and I will hear, you know, people will share, if you give space for it. And so I'll find out a lot of what are the particular areas. I mean, ultimately the number itself doesn't matter too much, but it is helpful, because if I have, say, like a 3-month engagement with a client or a 6-month engagement, we're, you know, if we have that glance of where we're at the start, then I can, as we're kind of wrapping things up or deciding what's next, if the client wants to continue with me, we can look back and say, okay, so you were scoring this, you know, you had a 2 in your spirituality when we talked before, and you've implemented these practices. How are you feeling now? What number are you at? So it's a good way for not just me, but for them to be able to chart that progress. So anyone can do that on their own. And I actually think it's a great idea. It might, for some people, it might be something you want to do like on a yearly basis. Like it could be a good yearly check-in and be like, hey, where am I, you know, in these different areas right now? And then, you know, maybe you set some goals around it. But if nothing else, like be checking in periodically and see how that transitions.
Thank you, Jamie. Up next, we have Jeff.
Hey, everything. I'm sorry, I got caught in some sort of a loop there, and I couldn't actually turn off the mute sign. So, Jamie, thank you so much for this really terrific presentation. And while you've been sharing with us, I had a chance to look you up and see your website and your blueprint there and your services. And I just want to I want to say something affirming to you, but also by way of a recommendation to others. So, you know, your story is great. Your story, it's a wonderful story. And what you have learned from it, and what you've chosen to learn from it, the morals that you have given to your story along the way are terrific. And I've had a similar life experience and have had to choose the best things to learn from it along the way. And but in addition, your practice and the process as you describe it, and you describe it easily and clearly, and in a way that I know can really change people's lives. And so I would recommend, really, even though we've never met and I've just heard you for this, 40 minutes, I'd recommend anybody on this call or who hears this tape to reach out to you. And so I just want to thank you for that. And who knows, I may even reach out to you myself. So sometimes it pays to take your own medicine. So in any event, I just want to let you know that I think you did a terrific job, and I think you can be a very deep and impactful support to people in every meaning of the word, in their own consideration of their lives and what we want from it, and what kinds of things we might try, and how we learn from it, and integrating what we want for ourselves, absolutely spiritually, absolutely in terms of our values, absolutely in terms of our relationships and our legacy, and whatever we might want to achieve with however much time each of us might have here, which more and more of us are aware we don't really know. So it makes sense to put it in some framework in order to say, okay, well, let's pretend for a moment that despite all the evidence that I'm going to live forever, maybe I'm not going to. And maybe I ought to figure out exactly what it is that I would do with however much time as a resource I have left. And all the questions you asked and the way you simplified your process were very compelling. So thank you for that.
Jamie, do you want to respond, or?
I think she might be frozen.
I think she is. Okay. So I I wonder if she knows that she's frozen. All
I'm
right.
betting
So
she does. We can have maybe actually until she maybe comes back. Do you want to maybe just do a brief recap, because a lot of us here got here a little bit late?
yeah, sure. So okay, so I can do a quick recap. So basically, Jamie went in the beginning. She discussed her life as an art. You know, she went into her early childhood, and in her early childhood, she was always that unconventional child. She tried different things, like adult things, like um. Oh, okay. So Jamie, I don't know if you know, but okay. So she's going to leave and come back. So I'll just do a quick summary. So basically, Jamie, when she was younger, she was always that adventurous child. She was always willing to try new things, new spicy things. So she was making the point that she had that adventurous spirit even in the beginning of her life. And that she was just one of those unconventional people. Basically, in high school, she said she told her, I think it was her guidance counselor or her teacher, that she wanted to be a music teacher. um Jamie, we're just summarizing, so do you want to do a quick summary, or because I think you'll do this better than I can?
Can you see and hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, that was so strange. I have no idea what happened. Evanique, I like your version of my story, so I don't need to interrupt it if you want to.
I mean, I can, and then you can just correct me.
Yeah, go ahead.
So basically in high school, in high school, Jamie, right, I think it was her teacher, and she was basically asking Jamie, are you sure that's what you want to do? Or do you want to be like a classical music teacher? And I think the teacher actually saw something in Jamie. Um, so so I think the leader actually saw something in Jamie that she didn't see in herself at the time. And so Jamie went on to do live musical theater. Um, and she kind of like did that. And then she went to college, and then she came back because her parents got divorced. So she wanted to make sure her twin brother was okay. Her twin brothers, right?
Yeah, I'll continue. So that was pretty darn close, Evanique. Yeah, it was a singer-songwriter that I knew, that I actually performed with, who was the one who said to me, don't go get a degree in music education if it's your backup plan, because you will never do the thing you actually want to do, which is go work in theater. So I took her advice at 17, and I did not get an education certification. So after college, I just went into the professional theater world, and I was doing that for a while. And then my brothers were about to start high school, and my parents announced they were getting divorced after 25 years of marriage. So, knowing our priorities, right? I knew my family was important to me. I just felt in my gut I needed to be around them, to be there for them dealing with a divorce. So I moved back to New Hampshire. And then it was while I was there that I had to piecemeal things together. So out of necessity, I started doing lots of amateur educational theater, preschool music classes, literally anything in the world that I was remotely qualified for, I threw my hat in the ring for. And what I found was I actually preferred working with children and with amateurs over professional theater. I didn't say this, but there's like you can see the impact in a much bigger way than like when you're doing professional theater, you can take the performers from here to here. But if you're doing educational theater, I really love seeing what people are capable of and then, you know, really helping them grow that. It's something that I do as a coach and teacher in all sorts of ways. So yeah, so that was what brought me back to New Hampshire, got involved in all of that, did a whole bunch of things, started a theater company, got a master's degree in community economic development, got a job working full-time in the arts, and realized that that dream job wasn't the dream job at the same time that my husband admitted he'd always wanted to be a touring musician. And on our incomes, we couldn't afford for me to just let him go do that. So then I got creative to figure out, okay, how do we do this? How can he be a touring musician? That inspired the idea of buying an RV and traveling the country and performing as we traveled. So we did that for 5 years and loved the lifestyle so much that it inspired me to become a coach and teach other people to go after the things that they want and create a life that they love. And the latest dream has been to do all of this in Canada. So my husband's back to school here in Canada. And yeah, this is what I do now.
Thank you, Jamie. And one thing I just wanted to mention is that that you and Ross had your honeymoon in Charlottetown, right? Preston, Rhode Island, and you guys decided that you wanted to move back there and you didn't know how you were going to do it and you did it. And I think that's like one of the most amazing things about you. Like you go after what you want and you do it and you strategize and you figure it out. I think you should like have a coaching class on strategy because you strategize really well. And so just wanted to bring that part up too, that, you know, you made that other dream come true for you and Ross. So that's great. But up next, we have Jing. And if anybody else has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat. And I just wanted to apologize really quick for the confusion in time. I understand that we did move the time back an hour. So I know that takes a little bit of an adjustment. So I apologize for any confusion for anybody that arrived late. So up next, we have Jing.
Hi, this is June. Yeah, I have to say sorry because I posted in the other group other than 5 to Living Ideas, and I didn't change the time. I didn't even know the time, so I was late. So I missed the whole front. I have to listen to the video. But so I appreciate the recap. I really like, Jimmy, really like what you're doing. And I think right now, it seems there's more and more people doing the coaching, life coaching, the dream coaching and, psychological landmark training. And it's really needed because, we have so little time to try everything. And it's much better if you build on other people's experience so you can actually get there quicker, So I think it's a great way, like there's more coaching for, and I'm surprised to find a lot of people, even though they have big house, they have a lot of money, and they said, oh, I don't like it. I'm suffering. So how can you suffer? I hate my job. So why are you still doing it? So it's I don't quite understand because I love my job. So and I travel too. I couldn't travel every day, but I don't really want to travel every day anyway, because I think it's when I do it in my spare time, I really appreciate the relaxed moment, so I can go back to work, recharge. Then I get bored again, then I need to go out. So I think it's it's great, the people like you who know how to achieve what they want. And I think if people get that skill, like Emnick mentioned, idea from between the idea and how you approach it. That's the reason we have this meetup, because I think we have a lot of philosophy we learn, a lot of concept, which is so important too. But on the other hand, how to use them to actually achieve the life you like. There's a big gap. There's a big gap between the idea to reality. And people like you helping people to get there and have a happier life. I think that's wonderful. If we have everybody's happier, no war, no, no frustration. Life is so much better.
Can I just say quickly, I agree with you. I think it solves all the world's problems, honestly. Like if people were in touch with what they actually loved, I think so much of the competition we have is because people are not happy, right? Like if you look at war and all sorts of things, I think it's that dissatisfaction that ends up being at the root of so much. So and so much of the inequalities, right? Like just if we could all just find a way to do what we love, and or be happy doing whatever it is we are doing, which they're two separate skills, but they're both interrelated, because if you don't actually know how to be happy with your life in the moment, you can get the thing you think is what you always have wanted and still not be happy. So that's why I'm also a mental fitness trainer now, because that's a piece of the puzzle, is learning how to stay as much of the time as possible in positive emotions and not get stuck in anxiety, frustration, fear, all of that stuff. I also, before we got too much further, I know I threw a note in the comment, but because I did get disconnected, I wanted to just speak to say thank you to Jeff for the extraordinarily generous comment you made. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jamie. And just want to reemphasize again that we appreciate you being here. So thank you. And for rolling with the punches tonight. We really appreciate that as well. Up next, I have Joe.
Yeah, thank you again for being here. And that is high praise from Jeff. And Jeff is a pretty dynamic guy. So it's that is high praise. He deals a lot in leadership, so he knows it when he sees it. So I appreciate that. One of the things that I caught up in the meetup page is you have helped people that are child free, that you focus on that in particular. Could you talk a little bit about the distinction between how you would help somebody that's child free versus somebody that has children? I imagine a lot of it has to do with boundaries and everything along those lines. So I'd love to hear really quickly just the distinction between those two.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I identify as child-free. I'm someone who realized, well, first of all, I will say as a young kid, I so knew I didn't want to have a baby that I had a plan with my mother that I would give my mother the baby until they were old enough to talk to me, and then I would take them back. That was child Jamie's version of how raising a child was going to go. But I had accepted that I really did not want to have children by the time I was in my mid-20s. And so because I'm in that group, I'm aware of the particular challenges / like just the situation of especially women, but men too, but especially women are expected in every culture I know to have kids, and everything's set up to have that be the thing. And people, like a lot of people, will make you feel like you are not a complete person, like you are not an adult if you don't have children, right? And for people who have kids, wonderful. But I can particularly speak to the people who don't. So some of the work that I do, I've realized, looking back at my clients, most of my clients to date have also been child-free. And I think they are probably attracted to me in part because my lifestyle is unconventional. And I think it's easier to live the kind of unconventional life I've lived, significantly so, if you're child-free. Yeah, you mentioned, Joe, like boundaries and things like that, which are a major part of my work with whoever I'm working with. But the expectations about how much time you have in a day, about like what your priorities are, they're going to shift significantly if you have kids in the picture or if you don't. So I am happy to work with anybody that's excited to work with me. But in particular, I've found that child-free people are probably more likely to knock on my door and say, hey, because I think they resonate a little bit more with my story. I also tend to connect with people who are in a transition period. So a lot of times people whose children are grown and now they're trying to figure out what's next, they will also connect to my story. But I'm not going to say no to either a working mother or a stay-at-home mom, or dad or whoever is parenting or caregiving. But I don't have as finely honed the tools to manage that kind of a life, right? So everybody's got their own circumstances, and I can speak to my own experiences and how I think I would approach it. But I'm also very open with people that there are a lot of other coaches out there who specifically cater to moms or parents, caregivers. So if someone is looking for those specific tools, then I would point them in the direction of those coaches.
Thank you, Jamie. I really do appreciate that. So if anyone has any additional questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat. In the meantime, I wanted to talk, I know you had mentioned that you were doing mental fitness, and one of the things I know, for full disclosure, I've taken this course with Jamie, Positive Intelligence, and for me, it has made all the difference in the world with dealing with what life throws at us sometimes, right? The good, the bad, the indifferent. But I think one of the things that I noticed in you is that you have incorporated the tools of mental fitness to help you deal with the things that life throws at us. So I just wanted to know if you wanted to speak a little more about that.
Absolutely. So I started the Positive Intelligence program maybe 14 months ago or something like that. So it was early last year that I got involved with that. And it's a mental fitness program. I tell people it's like a mental fitness or a mindfulness toolkit. So if you already have a mindfulness practice, if whether it's yoga, some other form of meditation, etc., that's awesome. But most of us are not taught how to bring that kind of mindfulness work into our daily lives. And it's really awesome to have a practice where you sit on a mat for 20 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is every day, maybe more, and meditate, or movement practice or nature practice, etc. But what I love about the Positive Intelligence program is that it does give me tools that I can integrate in. So like right now, I'm looking at all of your faces, and I can actually focus with real attention. If I want to ground myself in this moment, like I can notice the colors of your hair or your shirt as I look on the Zoom screen right now. I can listen with attention to your voices and try to notice all the different aspects of your voice. So I've been learning all of these different techniques, and it's really helped me because something that came up for me really during the pandemic, I would say, this started to come up. I have been dealing with anxiety my entire life, and I was in complete denial. I always, when people ask how I was busy. I was like, busy was my identity as a child, and it carried over into early adulthood. And when I hit the road in an RV, most of my reasons for anxiety went out the window. So I didn't have a lot of issues with it. And then in the pandemic, we all had plenty of reasons to be anxious. I picked up on almost daily yoga practice to deal with it, and that helped. But I started having panic attacks, and they were more frequent. And when I moved to Canada, it was like all the adrenaline, like all that cortisol, everything I needed to like focus and get my checklist done and execute this goal that I had and all the things I'd worked through. It's like it all came to a crashing halt. And I landed in Canada. I accomplished the thing. Like I could finally breathe. And then my body's like, hey, it's time for panic attacks. Like you've never seen them before. And they just started taking over my life. So I use these tools. I also worked with a therapist. Therapy is awesome. I went through an anti-anxiety program as well, but I use these tools with my clients and with myself every single day to ground myself when I start to spiral and my thoughts start to go to all the things that I haven't done in the day, all the things I haven't done in my life, questioning my life choices, questioning, is this really the thing I'm supposed to be focusing on right now? Or I've got, a voice in my head saying, oh, you could avoid this. You don't need to do this. I can use all the techniques I have at my disposal to ground myself in the moment and stay present to keep myself from getting anxious. I was finding as a singer, I was getting in my head in the group that I sing with, and it was getting in the way. And thanks to these techniques now, I'm just super present. So I've you practice these muscles. The mental muscles are just like physical muscles. You do work at the gym, like you do mental fitness work, and it gets easier and easier. So it's less and less of an issue. I haven't had a panic attack since August of last year.
Thank you for sharing that, Jamie. I think it definitely helps with anxiety, and I've used those techniques like when things are just going crazy, they're just really great grounding techniques. Like even like rubbing two fingertips together and feeling the ridges and things like that. So thank you for explaining that. Up next, I have Jing, followed by Joe.
Yeah, I really like the mental fitness. I actually have this, like our physical body, I'm trying to get more into fitness, but it's like so much maintenance. Like you have to keep training your muscle to have it and keep it. And I think the movie is more like training our emotional muscle. Like I see movie as a way of training, because I experience all kinds of emotion you don't normally experience in real life. And I like this mental fitness. I want to talk about you mentioned about the child-free. I think I really have this conflict. I think it's a challenge that we have so little time in one life. It's like I have kids, and I love them, but I also see my friends who don't have the kids, they do all the things I want to do. So it's like in Beijing, I have this friend. He has a horse, he's doing this horse riding and do all this. Oh my God, tennis class. It's like, oh my God, I really want to do all these things, but I don't have time. But at the same time, I enjoy it. So it's like, but I think the only thing I see, the limitation for women is like, you only have this small window to have kids. Man, they can have kids at 60 years old. They can change their mind, when they're 60. So I encourage my friend, younger client, whatever, I said, frozen your eggs. So in case you change your mind later, you can always have a kid. I think that's a limitation. I think it's more about the choice and freedom. Like you can choose whatever life you like, have kids or not have kids, but you need a choice. So I'm glad there's a technology helping women to have more choice, now or later.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing that is an option for a lot of people now. The decision I made with my husband, I think we'd had this conversation like before we got married, so we knew we were on the same page. I basically said, I don't see myself wanting to have kids. I think I'm clear about that. I'm also aware that I'm in my 20s and I might change my mind. And I want you to be okay with not having children. And he was. And I said, and in the event that I change my mind or we change our minds, then, let's look at adoption, because, our window of time will close. And to date, I'm about to turn 39. I still have no desire to raise children. And the lifestyle that we live and everything else, it works really well without kids. But yeah, we care for children in lots of other ways. Both my husband and I are teachers, and we love kids. It's just we don't want them full time. But if that does ever shift, there are other ways to care for to care for children. So we know that we can do it in other ways. But yeah, if you want to freeze your eggs and hedge your bets, like if you've got the budget for that, I think it's an amazing thing. And I absolutely encourage people to do it if it's in the budget and they're just not sure.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Jane. Up next, we have Joe.
Yeah, I'm sorry for all the questions, but it's just really, it's an interesting, very interesting discussion. So one of the things that we've talked about here a lot is about being a comprehensivist, which is basically having a number of varied experiences, not necessarily being siloed into one way of thinking about the world or seeing the world. And it's something that we host here every Sunday. We talk about it, how to make connections between various disciplines and things along those lines. And it looks like your career has been varied in the sense that you've been able to make those transitions that only a polymath or someone like that can. So I was just wondering if you could actually maybe speak about a little bit regarding the importance of having varied experiences and varied educational tracks as far as pursuing things. And I really maybe have a follow-up question even about the community economic development aspect, but that's a little bit specific, so I won't go down that road. But I did notice that with music, it's two different things. So I'd love to hear how that plays a role in your ability to seek out different adventures.
That's a great question. I've always been such a curious person, and I've always had interest in a lot of different areas. I think, some people have like the one thing, like if my husband could like eat, sleep, breathe music all the time, even though he likes other things, like he likes gaming and stuff, he would be 100% content with only music. But I've always liked exploring different areas. And I think it does make you more versatile in your career. Inevitably, like even for me in music, pursuing theater, one of my mentors would give me books on all the subjects related to whatever show I was musically directing, and basically said, it's your job, even though, yes, you're just teaching the music for the show, it's your job to know the history behind this show, to know if it's set in a particular time period in certain area, like know the context, know what the culture was and the history of that. He really taught me to do my homework, and I continued to. And, and I've always been interested in, in history and philosophy and English and taken all these different things. And it wasn't any different, like kind of as I went through school and beyond. And yeah, it continues to pay off. Like I don't know how much insight I have on it, except to say, I think maintaining curiosity and being open to where it might lead is really helpful. And I think, frankly, all the coaching work that I do, I work with people, of course, in all sorts of industries. It's pretty rare that I'm coaching someone who has an arts background, frankly. Most people don't. And for that to be useful, I need to have engaged in a lot of areas so that I do feel comfortable that, that I can speak to them and whatever they're going through. And some people come to me in part because maybe they're thinking of going down the arts path, but I want to be able to connect with them where they are too. I'll just mention that my master's degree in community economic development, I was finding in my arts work in New Hampshire that I was doing everything one could think of in the arts to make a living. And I was struggling. I wasn't struggling. I was anticipating there would come a time when I didn't want to drive all over the state of New Hampshire in the way that I was. I was putting so many miles on my vehicle every week because I'd have one job in this community and one job in this community. I'm teaching here, I'm directing a show here. Now my theater company's touring over here. It was just all over the place. And so I got my master's degree because I tried to picture like what else I could be fulfilled doing. And community economic development, like empowering people to have the tools that they need to, you know, to make money, to build successful communities, like all of that was really intriguing to me. And so, yeah, you know, in that program, I was studying like all sorts of things. Like I took a training the trainer class, and that's how I learned about redlining, right? Like I learned about all these different things in the program. I studied a little bit of accounting and like, you know, business management and all this stuff. It all helps. So the more we're open and we're curious, I think it just behooves all of us. And you never know what direction life's going to end up pulling you and how it might end up helping you out at some point.
Yeah, if I may just make a brief follow-up comment. I mean, I very much appreciate, especially about the arts, in particular, about having to learn the context of, you know, the characters that you're playing, because that in and of itself, you know, exposes you to so many different things and actually can pique your interest, is to say, maybe I want to go down this path. So it's the reason why I think the arts are actually so important in education, as far as you know, just getting out and doing something that you love, but also, you know, at the same time, you're getting varied experiences. So I really appreciate that answer. It was a great answer. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, arts help us to put ourselves in other people's shoes in a way that you don't get that particular experience in a lot of other contexts.
Thank you both. So if anyone else has any questions or comments, you can type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. I know we're coming to a close soon, but I wanted to just bring up one more thing. Jamie, when you talk about taking deliberate daily steps, and I think what that does is it takes the big goal, and when you break it down to smaller steps, and we've talked about this, when you break it down to smaller steps, it makes it attainable. One of our mutual friends used to always say, inch by inch is a cinch, yard by yard is hard. And I just have to say, you know, one of the things that you're great at is, you know, taking a bigger picture and breaking it down the steps. And I remember when we were talking and you and Ross were planning to move to Prince Edward Island, you would break everything down in steps and, you know, just the little thing. And I think that's what made that huge move attainable, because I think like moving to a different country is a huge undertaking, and I think you handled it so well, and I think that you made it attainable. So I don't know if you just wanted to talk a little more about doing the daily steps as we close out.
Sure. Yeah, it's so key, like you're saying, Evanique. And I really do think any goal can become feasible when you break it down into those steps. So in terms of how you would approach that, you know, I typically break it down into, you know, find like the markers that would make sense. If you were talking about a goal that's 10 years out, then, you know, for you to accomplish this in year 10, like where would you need to be at it in year 9? Where would you need to be at year 8? You know, you can like find ways to break it down that way. And then when you've got your years, okay, now maybe we have monthly goals or quarterly goals, and then you keep getting it down to size until eventually it's like, okay, what's the one thing I can get done this week? I do love the approach of the book, The One Thing. So I will remind myself, like when I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with my to-do list for the week, like if I'm going to accomplish one thing this week that's going to move the needle on X, what's that one thing? And then I prioritize that. And that's become a regular part of my practice, is making sure each week I know the top 1 to 3 things that have to get done for me to pat myself on the back and say, yes, you accomplished what you intended to this week. Because otherwise you can end up accomplishing 20 things, but not the most important thing. And if you don't accomplish the most important thing, then for instance, you're not going to move to Canada on time. So yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you, Jamie, for joining us for this meetup. I think this, I just think your life is amazing. Um, I think Eleanor, you have a question. Do you want to ask it?
Yes, I can, if it's not too much. I'm just wondering if every plan you did with your partner, do you think it would be possible for you to do it on your own?
I love that question. I'm friends with a lot of solo full-time travelers. They're all women. And so I've seen examples of a lot of other women who have done similar things on their own. I think the equation's a little bit different. Having a partner, in some ways, it's easier to have a partner, but frankly, there are times that things would be easier without. For me, in the case of my husband, there have been times recently this wasn't true, but most of our relationship and married life, I have been the main breadwinner. There have been times that he wasn't really earning money at all. And then there have been times that he's earned a part-time income. And of course, we moved to Canada, he's going back to school. And the nice thing for me will be once he graduates, then he will have a full-time job with benefits. And I will have the pleasure of knowing I get to do whatever I want without feeling the financial responsibility of making sure that we, you know, that we're okay as a couple. So from the financial standpoint, I don't have the same privilege that some people do if they're in a couple, just to clarify that. But I also think, you know, some things are less scary, frankly, when you are with a partner versus solo and all of that. But I think I would have probably tweaked things a little bit, but I think I could have accomplished it solo. But it's really nice. I'm really thankful to have a partner because obviously a lot of things end up being easier. I think the older I get, the more I realize that you don't get everything that you want from someone. You don't get it all in the same place. And so as I get older, I have more friends like Evanique, and you know, I have more connections, now I'm really finding a community here on the island. I had found a really nice online community before that. And that can make it easier to be a solo traveler or solo or adventurer at heart in whatever form it takes. But, you know, try to find support in people wherever you can, because to go it completely alone, even if we are alone, I don't think any of us ever wants to feel completely alone all the time. We want to know that we have some people who have our backs, and there are a lot of people out there who've done things like we want to do if we can seek them out.
Thank you so much for that, Jamie. I think that's really important. You know, especially, you know, if you don't have like a partner, like a romantic partner, that you still have your friends. And I think that's one thing, especially with being single, is like, yeah, you can do it alone, but you can also, you know, rely on your friends. And I think like, you know, like I think we've been a great example of that, like where I can lean on you, like for decisions. I'll tell this quick story and then I'll go to Joe. When I was laid off in 2019, for my job, you were there and you were like helping me go through the steps of looking for a new job and creating a new opportunity for myself. And now I have a great opportunity that engages me. And, you know, I don't think, and I always say this, but I don't think I would be where I am in life without you and our group of friends. So, um, and I think my life is always for the better for knowing you. And you know, not just because you're kind and sweet, but because you are practical and you can tell me what I need to hear rather than what I want to hear. And you challenge me in the best way possible. So thank you for that. Um, Up next, I have Joe.
It's pretty difficult to follow. That was a pretty incredible compliment. Maybe actually in a way that I will follow it up with just a question is, one of the things that I think about is the roles, different roles we play. And I think she may be frozen again. No, you're muted, Ebony.
Jamie, are you there? Uh-oh.
Yeah, I
Hold on.
believe she's frozen.
Okay,
I mean, truthfully,
Maybe
that was a
she still
beautiful.
can hear. Like,
I don't know. I'm gonna send her a message. Oh no.
She's gone. Well, I gotta be. Oh no, somebody else dropped off.
so, Ebony, you met Jimmy through the training?
No, actually, I met Jamie. So one of our mutual friends decided in 2000, what year was that? 17? Yeah, 17, to have like a group talk. Like, she decided to do an online group. And we all decided to join in with her. And so it started off just like a self-help book club, and we would read different books and we would talk. And then over the years, we just had like weekly meetups, and then we became friends. And me and Jamie's met a couple of times in person, and eventually it just came this weekly thing. Like we would always meet weekly, we would talk. Sometimes we would do walks together. So it's just a thing that developed out of a random group of people. And then like she became one of my greatest friends.
So that was not online, right?
Well, it started off online, and then
But people all live in the same city.
huh?
People live in the same city?
No, we all lived in different parts
Oh.
of the country.
But how you
Um,
met with Jimmy? She was in New York City?
you mean when we met together?
Uh-huh.
So like when she was doing RV,
Oh.
if she was coming through Pennsylvania, we would meet at, like, not in Philadelphia, but like, outside of Philadelphia. It would be where she was coming en route, and I would just join her. So like
I
twice.
am still
Oh.
here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I don't know what is up with my screen, but I am at least here on audio.
So they were just asking how we met, Jamie. So I was just letting. I'm sure you heard that, but
Yeah, I've actually heard everything.
That's what I said. She may still hear it.
okay.
So yeah,
Joe,
I
did you
am
want to?
here.
No, I mean, I thought it was a beautiful, summation of your relationship with Jamie, and I mean, again, that is high praise. So maybe I was just going to build on that really quickly to a certain extent. One thing about people that don't have children is that they do need community. That's an important part about how they derive strength from one another in times of need, just like Evanik had discussed. So I was just wondering, so how do you define what is a good friend? Because I think that's a question that we've been discussing. I've been discussing with a lot of friends lately. So maybe just to hear your thoughts on that, and then that'll be my last question, I promise.
That's a lovely question. What is a good friend? So One of the things I've been thinking a lot about recently is that I look, I think when I was younger, I probably had an image that all good friends kind of looked alike, right? That they all needed to have equal amounts of time and a lot of time to commit to, you know, a steady relationship with me, trust. And I mean, I do think the level of trust and understanding is a part of how I would define a good friend. But I think I've been focusing on how different friends in my life are sort of there for different reasons, have different purposes, and we all go through phases in our life when we maybe are more available or not. So for instance, I have a new friend who I've gotten quite connected to online, but he is a parent and parenting and a neurodivergent child who's quite young and requiring a lot of his resources. So in-person meetups with him and his family are hard to come by. I have other friends who you know, are also child-free, who have more availability at their current stage of life. So they might be more people that I want to you know, engage with in person. But I think what I'm looking for in a good friend is I like to be able to have a certain level of connection and understanding where especially I look for good conversations. I look for the ability to sort of cut through the superficial and get to what's real, to feel like I can understand who this other person is, and if there are things I don't understand, that they are good listeners and willing to have those conversations. And yeah, and I look, at least for some of my friends, I think I want to be able to have those in-person experiences, but I also have beautiful friendships, of course, with people online. So I think, yeah, it's looking for those connections where we can have conversations like this. That is like one of my favorite things in life, honestly, is to be able to engage with people in those kinds of discussions. So that's what I'm looking for in a good friend.
Thank you for that, Jamie. Yeah, and I think you exude all of those qualities. So I want to thank you again for being here, for sharing your life with us, and sharing your adventures. Um, One of the things I love about you is how adventurous you are, and just hearing about your adventures over the years has been amazing. But and not even but and like the way like you've developed into this amazing coach, um, you know, and the people that I know that you've helped has been amazing. Um, I think there's a question in the chat. From Mindy. Are there groups you recommend to meet other child-free folks in their 30s and 50s?
Oh, that is such a great question. So I do have a group on Facebook that I would love to see you in, but the child-free groups that I hang out with, there's a group on Facebook called Child-Free Chicks Confidential, and there's a pretty wide mix of ages. I would say if anything, I would probably say it's like probably 20s through 50s. I have made a lot of connections with people in that 30s through 50s age range in that group. There's also, I'm in a child-free wives group for people who are married. And then I'm also in, there are some child-free book clubs on Facebook. So those have also been cool ways to connect with people. Obviously, if you can connect over books, that can be a nice way to meet people. So if you just look child-free anything on Facebook, there are like crafting groups, there are all sorts of things. So you can look for like the areas that you know, like kind of where your hobbies intersect with child-free, and you might meet some good people in there. Yeah, don't be afraid to introduce yourself to folks, because I do it regularly, and yeah, I've got some really great friends in that age bracket that I've met on Facebook specifically. So, great question.
Yeah, and then we have one more, Jamie, and then then we can wrap up. So Judy had a question. What about groups you can recommend for elders like over 75? And Judy, I just want to say I did not know you were 77. Would have never guessed that one.
Groups for over 75. Another awesome question. I do not know particular groups off the top of my head, but I can tell you I've met a lot of my older friends in that age bracket from either book clubs. Actually, my college, so I went to Smith College. Like, there are some groups that are specific to the college, and I have met some people in there as well who are child free, as well as just older folks who are looking to connect with people. And also, I will just put in a plug for singing, right? So I direct a chorus here on Prince Edward Island, and I sing in a choral ensemble. And the chorus that I direct is incredibly intergenerational. So we've got 2 newbies who are 12, and then most of our folks are in their 20s through their 80s. I think our oldest member is 92. So we have a beautiful mix. I think the average age in the chorus is about 67. And so music, if it at all interests you, music or the arts in general can be a great way to make friends in the 70s and beyond.
Thank you, Jamie. Again, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And I think you are the perfect example of, someone designing their own life. And I like the word that you use too, crafting your own life. And I think it speaks to your creativity about this. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you everyone else who's also here and who participated and who listened in. We really appreciate that you spent your Friday night with us. So thank you. Anybody have any closing thoughts? All right.
I will just quickly thank you, Evanique, and thank all of you for having me. This has just been a really encouraging, fun event to be a part of. I really appreciate you all listening and sharing your insights with me.
Thank you. And have a good night, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.